Today I thought I would do something a little bit different and come out, get a photo of something that I really like, and then show you my editing process of it as well. I thought it'd just be a really nice way to show you what I do and give you an idea of why I do things a certain way as well. One thing to note is that this episode is sponsored by Capture One, as I do use their software for a lot of my professional work when I'm doing weddings and portraits, etc. But now that I'm sponsored by them, I'm able to use it in my YouTube videos, which I much prefer because I really like the way I can use the software on Capture One. For me, it just suits me a lot better and I feel like I'm getting a little bit more out of my images. But anyway, I thought I would show you what I'm gonna take a photo of, and there's this really cool tree in the background here. Actually, it's two trees. They're so close to each other right now that they've basically entwined and grown into each other, which I thought was really fascinating. I've not really seen much like this before, and what makes this really cool is that the fact that the biggest tree is a pine tree and what's below is obviously something else. I'm not sure what the name of it is in English right now, but it has changed to yellow, which is just making this look really special, and it just suits really well with the environment. So I think this could be a really cool image to edit. I'm not really sure if I want to shoot this in landscape or vertical at the moment, because the one benefit of shooting this in landscape is I'll be cutting off the top of the tree, but a lot of the sky won't be in the image, which is really good because right now it's just completely overcast and it'll just be white and it won't look nice at all. So I kind of want to cut that out as much as possible, and it doesn't really matter if I chop the top of the other tree away. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I might try it in vertical as well just to see if it looks good. But I think I'm going to go for quite a nice moody shot here, maybe darken the edges and put a lot of light onto those yellow leaves. One thing I'll definitely be doing is I'm going to be shooting this at f8. I just want to get all that detail in there. I don't really care about softening things up right now. I just want to catch all that detail, get that crisp, just get a really nice crisp image here, especially with getting those colors coming through. Seeing as it's overcast, I don't really have to worry about doing multiple exposures and capture certain different lights and stuff, because obviously I'm actually going to be doing that while I'm editing. Because it's quite dull, I'm actually going to have my shutter speed at around 1/30th of a second. Got my ISO down to 100, and I've got on a 2-second timer just so that I make sure I don't shake the camera when it takes the photo, just to ensure that I get all that detail coming through. Now you will have just seen the final image and it fading out into the original. I did it that way just so you could see how the differences were. Obviously the original image did look pretty good, which you can see here, but the final edit just has that little extra something else. And also you will have noticed that I ended up going with the vertical shot. The landscape shot was nice, but I just didn't like the fact that there was just so much going on the edges. There was so many other trees in the background and stuff distracting you from the main element, so I decided to go for the vertical shot. I just felt like it was the right option with this, and I felt like, yeah, I just felt like it was the better image. But anyway, let's get into actually editing this and I can discuss how I went through my processing. So I really kind of wanted to go for a little bit of a nice atmospheric and moody look, and the first thing I often end up doing here is looking at my temperature and maybe adjusting the colors a little bit. So at the moment it seems maybe a little bit too warm, so I just bring that down just a touch, and I might add a little bit of magenta in. I always feel like it just adds a little bit more dynamic because there's so much green in the image already as it is, so just adding that little bit of magenta in does help quite a bit. And then I go into my color editing section, and I will often just do the full selection of the colors and just bring the hue down a little bit, just so I start getting a little bit more of those reddish pink tones coming through, especially in the yellow. It just adds a little bit more I don't know, of a more rounded feeling to the image. I think that's probably quite good. I might add a little bit more saturation in. Sometimes it doesn't look better with it, but and there's times where even taking some of the color away can just make things a little bit more interesting. What I often will do is actually boost the colors a bit and then take some of that green away and make it a little bit more gray on the greens, because often enough the yellow just seems to pop just that little bit more. And I'm also gonna see what it looks like if I bring down the hue on just the yellow tones here. It's adding a really special and atmospheric look here by bringing that down. I'm not sure if I want to bring it down so much, but just a touch away from the end there, and bring the saturation back up a little bit. Sometimes bringing up the lightness or putting down the lightness can make things a little bit different as well. So I think I'm just going to add a little bit of lightness into that yellow, and then I might go back into the green and actually drop it down a little bit just to darken it slightly if it works. And also because of those reddish tones and stuff in there, especially with the tree in the center there, there's a lot of this red that I kind of don't like actually, so I tend to bring that down a little bit, and also sometimes I lighten up just to bring back some of those details. I think that often helps. And also take the hue a little bit more to the right, so I'm getting a little bit more greener tones in and just getting rid of some of that redness. And then I use the smoothness as well. I like to smoothen things out just so it's not so intense. So bring that smooth up a little bit. And already that's looking pretty good. I think that looks really nice as it is. You can already see quite a difference. It was really yellow and pretty green. So now I just think it just has this little bit more of a personal feel, and you just are drawn into those leaves a lot more now. So now I'll go into my sharpening area, because for some reason Capture One always puts 50% in on the noise reduction, so I take that completely out. I don't want any noise reduction in there at all. And sharpening is already on 180, so I just put that up to around 200, 250, I think, or at least between that. I just like to get a lot of that detail in. You can already see there's so much detail in these leaves, and it's a pretty good image. So go back now and I'll go into the main editing section. And this is where obviously I'm gonna do the most of the work. There's not so much highlights in here. The highlights are pretty well done here because I exposed quite nicely. But sometimes I will just check. I'll bring the highlights down just to see if I'm maybe gaining some detail back in there. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. So in this case, it's not doing huge differences. So I'm gonna put it around 22 just to bring something back, just in case there is something there. Shadows I don't always like to bring up because it just changes things a little bit too much. So I generally will not touch the shadows at all. Anything, I'll actually bring up the brightness and go from there, because I like to bring up the brightness and then edit darkness back into it afterwards. So bring that up to around 15 and then add a little touch of contrast. So around 5% should work quite nicely. And then just checking my saturation a little bit. I know I already messed with the colors and changed the saturation and stuff already, but when I do the saturation separately for the whole image, I do like to bring it back just a little touch. So I think 8% here actually works really nicely. And then what I want to do now is actually check out the vignette. I pretty much always put a vignette into my images, and already you can see that made a huge difference. I'm not sure if I want to go so strong because I'm starting to lose some detail in some of the areas, but I think I might go down quite far here. So minus 2.59, I think that's looking pretty good. And what I'll often do now is I actually tend to darken the edges a little bit more by using layers, and then I bring some detail and lightness back into the tree by using a separate layer on top of that again. So what I'll do now here is I'm actually gonna use a radial mask, and I'll go around the main part of the tree, but this radial mask I'll be using mainly to edit the outside edges. So what this will do now is allow me to basically change the brightness and pretty much everything around the edge and not affect the middle so much. But as you can see, it does change a little bit because it is faded off a little bit, so it will affect some of the center, but that's actually good because that allows it to look a little bit more natural without this being a weird ring around the image. So I'll darken that a little bit, and what I often do is I'll actually take the contrast away from the parts that you're not really looking at, because your eyes should be going to the main subject, and that's where all the details should really be. So by me taking the contrast away from the edges and the background, it takes some of that detail away and it becomes a little bit more flat, so your eye is automatically drawn to that main subject. So I'll bring that down just enough where it starts looking a little bit washed out, and I think that's starting to look pretty good here. And saturation, I'm actually going to bring that down in the edges again, and I think that's looking pretty good already. Highlights, I think I'm just going to leave. And then sometimes I actually bring up the shadows in this case, because what I'll often do is fix that vignette a little bit so it doesn't look so intense in a strange way. I know it sounds odd to say that, but often the vignette, it works really well, but then you see there's some really dark edges, and by bringing those shadows back up, it kind of fixes those edges a little bit more. And now I actually want to make the brightness a little bit darker here again. And one thing I've noticed is a little bit too blue for me right now. So I'm actually going to add a little bit of warmth into this background. Maybe not too much. And then maybe actually bring some of the green tones back. Because sometimes that magenta look can be a little bit too intense. So already it's starting to look a lot nicer, and I think it's starting to get somewhere here. Now I'm actually going to focus a little bit more on the main tree and just pick out certain details that I actually want to accentuate here. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer, and I'm going to use the draw mask, so basically the brush tool here, and I'm just going to go over certain areas that I just want to add a little bit more of a pop to. And what I'll do is often go on the areas that are a little bit lighter. So I'll just adjust the brush size here. So I'll just start drawing in the areas that I want to adjust. Okay, so now that I got the areas masked in that I want, I often will go to basically fix how it is and just spread it out a little bit more. So I right click on the layer and then I click on refine mask, and you'll see here this is basically how it is as just after drawing it. And by using refine mask, what it will do is when you put the radius up, it will spread out into the same areas that are similar to the tones and the colors, and it won't go into the background or anything like that. So that means it kind of just stays within the area you chose, which is really nice, whereas using a feather mask will just spread out everywhere. So this works out really nicely, and it just keeps it in the place that you want to edit. So right now I'll just put up the brightness a little bit on those areas, and I'm going to add a little bit, or maybe I actually might take it away. Yeah, I'm actually going to take away a little bit of saturation on those bright areas. I just want to zoom in a little bit so we get to see it a little bit better here. And then sometimes I'll add a little bit of contrast just to add a little bit of a pop. I feel like maybe the brightness here is a little bit too much. I think that works a little bit better there on 4, and adding that little pop in just adds a little bit more to this. And then I add some clarity into this. I don't want to add too much. I already see that it's gone up pretty high here. If I go even higher, it just starts to look a little bit strange. So I add around 27% on the clarity here. And I think that's already starting to look pretty good. It's just making things pop out a little bit more, and it gives you something to focus around with your eye and just read the image a little bit more. There's one more thing I forgot to do, and that was on the first layer with the background. I actually take away the clarity because I like to wash the image out just a little bit, and it just takes away some of that detail in the background. Already you can see there's a lot of detail in there, but even when I drop down the clarity, there's still a lot of detail there. So it's not made a huge difference, but it adds a little bit of a different feel to it. Sometimes what I'll do as well is even bring down the structure, which can start to soften the image a little bit. And in this case, I actually want that to happen. And I think that looks pretty good there. I'm still not too happy about the color tone at the moment. And I think I need to play around it a little bit more with the tones there. Maybe it's a little too blue. And then actually, maybe I need to bring the saturation down a little bit more here. I think that's starting to look a bit better. It's getting rid of that blue tone. I still have some of the greens in there, but it's getting rid of that horrible blue that was in the background. One thing I can do here now is go back to my main color editing tool and actually take away the saturation of the blues, and often that will help quite a lot here. And that way I think it just gives it a little bit more of a rounder look, and it feels just a little bit more correct. I just wanted to see what it looked like if I put some of that green back in. I think almost having the green completely gone right now actually looks way better. So I think that's going to work. And then just darken it up a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're almost pretty much done here. Let's just see the difference. You can just see this as I take the layer away on those leaves, you can just see that it just added a little bit more, just a little bit of a pop there. And also with the background, it just feels a lot better. It just brings you into that center of the image there. I might add a little bit more of a vignette again, I think just to kind of add a little bit more contrast and darken things up a little bit. And also maybe actually going to take away some of the clarity in the main image. So now I've put it down to 33, and that's taken some of the clarity away on the whole image. It's still very sharp. It's a very nice image. And I think we're pretty much almost done here. There shouldn't really be too much else. If anything, if I could have, I wouldn't really have any of that sky in. But it's looking pretty good. I think the final thing I want to do right now, which you will have already seen, is adding a crop. And I'm actually going to go for a 4:5 crop here. I just think it feels a little bit better and makes it a little bit more intimate, and you're a little bit closer to the image that way. So I'm going to crop it down, and I think about there looks really nice. I just want to crop it a little bit more in so that the main trunk of the tree is pretty much into the center of the image. Push it up a little bit, and I think that's pretty much it. It looks really, really good. I like the finished look. It feels really nice. It has a nice atmospheric feeling to it. The colors that you want to see are popping, and I think that's what's supposed to work here. So that's pretty much it. And here's what it looked like before. What a difference. But yeah, I really like this image, and it's turned out to be really nice. There was one more thing, and that was that I actually often like to add a little RGB curve just to kind of fade those blacks a little bit, just so they get a little bit more gray, and that often just adds a little extra touch to the image. But otherwise, I really enjoy this image. This was quite a nice one to edit. It's not always that I get it right, and it's not always that I find a really nice image to edit either. But I thought I would just let you guys see how I process things pretty much from the start, where I am out in the location, getting the image, my mindset of what I'm doing and my feeling about that image and why I'm doing it, and then bringing it back and it's showing you exactly my mindset of what I want to get out of the final image. I think that's pretty cool to show. So I hope you actually enjoyed that, and I hope you got a little something out of it. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this video is sponsored by Capture One. And if you are interested in using the software, I have a link below, and please make sure to use that link because it does help me out a little bit. But you can take it on a trial first just so you can test the software out. But if you do like it, you can buy the subscription. But please make sure to use my link when you do that, because it will help out quite a lot. I do spend a lot of time making these videos and I don't really get much in return. And having that is a really nice thing to have. And also, I'm going to put this image up onto my Etsy account. So if you would like a print of it, then you can go to my Etsy account, which is in the link below, straight to this image, and you can order a print and I'll ship that out to you. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up for the video, and I'll see you all next time.